Okay, well, thank you. I think it might be useful to talk a little bit about the background before I launch into a sort of overview of the content of the book. Um, the search was actually my second book on the faith, and it was first published in 1989, and then there was a second edition in 1998. And by chance, just the other day, I got a copy of the original hard copy, which I've not had in the house for several years. And the great thing about that is it has a lot of photograph illustrations of people involved in the justice issue over over the millennium, so to speak. And I was very happy to see that. I'd forgotten all about it. Okay, well, the book was not, as I say, not my first. It was the second, and the first one was "The Earth Is But One Country," which actually happened by accident. It evolved from an original handwritten letter, which I sort of copied to several of my friends, who were all nearly all agnostic to some degree. And my objective in writing that book was to try and explain why I had this crazy step uh, of embracing the Baha'i Faith. And I should say that I was an agnostic myself at that time. The reason I felt the need to write is that all the existing introductions to the book, many of which I loved, but they all seem to assume I believe in God by the reader, and that didn't fit with my friends. Um, After I'd finished the Earth, I felt I needed to go further. Um, I wanted to specifically relate the faith to global history. And there was a couple of reasons for that. The first was I had read quite a few books on global history over time, starting with the H.G. Wells book. I think he was one of the first to write such a book, looking at the whole world. And that came out in 1920. And of course, since then, there have been quite a few. But I found them quite unsatisfactory because there was something missing on the spiritual dimension of it all. So that was one issue. I wanted to try and tackle that problem. And the second reason, and maybe it's even more powerful, I don't know, was the whole Baha'i concept of progressive revelation, this idea of spiritual evolution running alongside um, physical evolution and that sort of thing. Well, I couldn't think of a way of doing this. I couldn't think of a concrete theme that I could sort of base the book on. And then one day it suddenly came to me. Baha'u'llah's statement, the best beloved thing in my sight is justice. Wow. So that is a superlative. Justice comes before everything. And as I started meditating about this, it's evident that the idea of justice has been around for a very long time, one shape or another, if only because people, they might not talk about justice directly, but they were certainly aware at various times that they were being treated unjustly. Um, and sometimes we'll get quite excited about that. So this raised in my mind the question of, well, what is a just society? And looking back over history and again meditating on the Baha'i writings, the best I could come up with for the book was put in the preface, and this is a little quotation from the preface, defining a just society, trying to define a just society. The title of the book is The Search for a Just Society, and there's a picture of the cover of the book. It means a society which gives freedom to all its citizens and encourages them to achieve their full potential, physical, mental, and spiritual. Such a state of affairs has various implications. It involves, or it must involve, an ethical system that inspires a sense of the oneness of mankind, intellectual integrity, and responsibility for the development of both the self and for promoting the welfare of others, as something that creates a balance between rights and duties. And it was from this that I believe all other discussion of justice follows. So this was to be the backbone of the book. The history of the idea of justice as it moves towards this goal, the goal I've just stated, first in the past, then in the present, and finally in the future, and in the latter case, how it relates to the Baha'i Faith. And when I talk about the present, the middle of those three, I'm measuring the present from about 1800 with the start of the Industrial Revolution, which led to the greatest change in the human experience, life expectancy, the length of it, size of the world population, the burden on the natural environment, and all these sort of issues since the coming of agriculture. I mean, it was in many ways one of the most important changes in the human experience. So it seems to me that it's still part of our experience, and that's why I choose to start the present around about 1800. Okay, coming now to the content of it all, let's start with the past. There were sort of three ideas I wanted to hang my thoughts on. The first was the ancient empires, which brought comparative peace, which is vital for a justice society. It's a major part of justice, in a way, peace, to large areas for long periods of time. The most famous being Pax Romana, the one we're mostly familiar with in the West. In addition, each empire contributed something special relevant to a just society. Egypt with its public storehouses, so that ordinary people will be ready when there was a famine or there was bad weather and things like that, and they had to live on resources already, agricultural resources already collected. Mesopotamia, with its codification of law with regard to property, family, and punishment, and this, very important, made public on various pillars scattered throughout the Mesopotamian empire, so that people could actually see what justice was and what crime and punishment was in a sense in advance, which again is an important part of justice, knowing what is expected of you. And then you have the Confucian China with its emphasis on the family as a bridge of stability and order between the individual and the state. And the Greek and Roman culture, with its, which brought the idea of the republic, representative government, a tribune to present grievances of the people, and perhaps above all, its rational philosophy and study of the human form in art, which was so impressive that it inspired the European Renaissance about 1,000 years later. So, the first theme is the empires and their contribution to the evolution of justice. Second, and more important, were the great religions of the world. The basic concept of God is itself a powerful force in persuading humans to act justly. In addition, as is well known today, Judaism, with its story of Adam and Eve, and going on to Moses and the Ten Commandments, and the replacement of unlimited revenge with a just concept of an eye for an eye. The prophets the Jewish prophets began a long tradition in religious history of sitting in judgment on the actions of government. This is an important role of religion. I think it's it's been recognized for 2 or 3 thousand years now. Zoroastrianism became a part of the justice theme, known for its truthfulness, honesty, and cleanliness. Hinduism, with its tolerance of diverse views and appreciation for the vastness of creation. Buddhism, for detachment from materialism. Christianity, for Jesus, with his emphasis on the brotherhood of man. And later the Catholic Church, with its global perspective, and the Protestant insistence on individual religious freedom. So that's the great religions. The third thing is the story doesn't end there. There's the sort of revolutions of getting close to our own time, which evolved out of Christianity, which had led to the Enlightenment and new views about justice. And there were three revolutions of significance that happened in the West between 1689 and 1789. First in England in 1689, evolving from the medieval Magna Carta. From that came a constitutional monarchy and a Bill of Rights. And then in 1776, in America, we had the Declaration of Independence, followed by the creation of a federal constitution uniting 13 former colonies. And finally, in 1789 in France, came the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and that powerful chant that we're all so familiar with from school, I guess, liberté, égalité, and fraternité. So that's a sort of little overview of the past as I was writing about it. Coming to the present, it seems, starting again, as I said, with about 1800, the drive towards greater justice has rapidly increased and broadened and speeded up. Our times have been a time of struggling most clearly in the direction of justice. And there were several aspects to that. The first is greater political and social equality, which included the abolition of slavery and serfdom, the creation of the national state based on self-determination, and the spread of democracy, including universal suffrage for both men and women. And finally, most important, the rule of law. Second thing is a drive towards a major reduction in extremes of wealth and poverty. And this, there were many instruments for this, the coming of the trade unions initially, cooperatives, socialism, the welfare state, including progressive taxation, and most recently the consumer society, linked to its concern about living in harmony with nature. The third thing is the beginning of moves towards international cooperation and a reduction in the incidence of war between nations. These moves started, I guess, with the Congress system after the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, the League of Nations after the First World War, and the United Nations after the Second World War, when the latter bringing with it a universal declaration of human rights. These were very important and powerful things, and I think sometimes we tend to underestimate them until we put them in historical perspective. So I've tried to deal a little bit with the past and the present, and now I'd like to say a few things about the future. And this comes to the Baha'i Faith. This belief in a just society is based on the faith's principles, visions, and practical teachings. These promise a society which could indeed achieve the suggested definition of a just society, which I mentioned earlier with regard to the preface of the book. The most obvious teachings supporting this viewpoint are specifically the unity of religions. All religions are essentially one. The unity of humanity. All human beings were the children of God. We're all brothers and sisters, the children of God. Much and so that's the basic vision. Much has been achieved by the Baha'i community in the last 200 years towards moving in that direction. Today, there are Baha'is in just about every country in the world. We started off as a small group in Iran, and now, less than 200 years on, we're in every country in the world. There are Baha'is in every country of the world. And not only that, they're organized. They're not just individuals, into thousands of functioning communities at the local level and nearly 200 at the national level. And most important, as a result of building up those sort of levels of organization, we now have the first Universal House of Justice, which was elected in 1963 and has been elected every 5 years since that time. So we've made progress, but as it must be very clear to everyone, the world still faces immense challenges, most obviously with regard to climate change or a devastating war, nuclear war or something of that sort. And the Universal House of Justice in 1985 issued a statement addressed to the peoples of the world, which was called the Promise of World Peace, addressing this issue. It said that the most great peace, which will be based on justice, will be achieved. It will be achieved, absolute confidence at that. But humanity has a choice on how it will be achieved. The first choice is, and I'm quoting here, after unimaginable horrors precipitated by humanity's stubborn clinging to old patterns of behavior. These words need to be thought about. The second alternative is an act of consultative will. We decide that we will have peace and justice collectively, rationally. In other words, there is hope, a vital factor in attracting people not only to the faith in a world where hope seems to be increasingly in short supply, but also in motivating action towards achieving peace. If we have no hope, what's the point? So hope is tremendously important, and that is what is given to us very clearly by the promise of world peace. And the Baha'i Faith is not just about words. It's not just about vision and that sort of thing. It's about practical issues. And the Baha'i community has set itself the vital task of working for the second option, the act of consultative will, achievement of world peace. First, by cooperating with others working for peace and justice. We work with everyone who has passion in that direction. And secondly, running parallel with that, an alternative world model operating according to the principles of consultation. Consultation is very different from debate, which is how we conduct our affairs in democracy. With regard to the latter action, the Universal House of Justice has said, and this is a quote, if the Baha'i experience in running its own affairs can contribute in whatever measure to reinforcing hope in the unity of the human race, we are happy to offer it as a model for study. And that has been done several times, as I'm aware of, which I could talk about at another time. And finally, before ending up on that, I thought of acting collectively. I would like to say a couple of things about ourselves as individuals, what we can do as individuals. These are two thoughts that I have. The first, when talking with our friends, our neighbors, our family, raise questions about their views on what is going on. in their own lives and in public affairs, and get them to talk about justice. And then taking it a step further, are they seeing justice? Do they see injustice? And when they start talking about them, well, what do you mean by justice? And get people thinking about, well, how big is this issue? How many things it covers? And most important, we have to listen. This is the whole point about questions. You have to listen to what is said and gear your response to facilitate clear communication. You know, there are two major issues when trying to communicate: listening and talking after listening. The second thing I would like to suggest we can do as individuals, that we should periodically ask ourselves if we are conducting our relations with others according to the principles of Baha'i consultation, and ask our assemblies to do the same. And this again comes to that quote from the House of Justice. We all know that switching from old world habits is a difficult thing to do and requires conscious effort. So I think I've been talking a bit too long, and I think I'll bring it to a close there. Thank you so much.